Thank you, Mr. DeBella. I'd like to start off reminding the school board and the public that approximately 5 years ago, we developed a mission and vision for the district, the vision being that we wanted to be the educational provider of choice. And I think that following up on the presentation that we just had, I think that I can confidently say that we do indeed have parents out there and community members who have chosen to be a part of our district because of the programs and the opportunities that are available for our students. But I really want to just highlight the mission statement today, especially the part our mission is to be educationally relevant, to have a focus on achievement and growth, and have a priority on people. But I really want to focus on the educationally relevant piece, because what we've done is we've tried to measure different programs and initiatives that we put into place against the idea of, is this educationally relevant? Is this providing our students with the tools and the skills they need to leave spring forward and be productive and contributing members of society, whether it's in the vocations, trades, or whether it's they're going on to college before they go into a vocation. But we want to make sure that we are educationally relevant. And one of the things we did approximately, we began to really look at this 5 years ago, was the idea of modernized learning, making sure that the instructional practices that we had in our classrooms was indeed relevant, was indeed preparing our students to move out into a broader world and to be contributing members of that world. And so we really begin to look at the whole concept of modernized learning and changing our instructional practice through the implementation and inclusion, infusion, if you will, of technology. And we've done that across the board. We've added technology to the extent that smart boards in classrooms, access to digital content, the devices that are available. And we've classified that as modernized learning because we really wanted to focus on the whole idea of it of being educationally relevant. And so we developed that modernized learning program approximately 4 years ago, and with the goal of being to maximize student engagement and increase differentiation through the use of technology. So we want to make sure that the students are sitting in our class, that they are engaged in the content. They are engaged in the instructional practice as it's occurring in the classroom, rather than being passive listeners or observers of the education, of the instruction. So we want to make sure that that was really our goal. And we really wrestled with the idea of what do we want to be about when we talk about modernized learning. And we really thought that, making sure that our students are highly engaged and that differentiation is increased, because we believe that those factors would indeed produce the level of achievement and that we were looking for. And we know that in many areas, the district is indeed high achieving. We continue to build on that high achievement. And we've focused on the idea of making sure that our students are able to leave spring forward and know how to use technology beyond Twitter and Snapchat and all the other things that are out there. We want them to be able to be productive and engage content using the technology that was available so that they could produce, so that they could learn, that it was part of the instruction that was happening within the classroom. So we really came up with the idea of modernized learning, and we began to look at how can we make sure that technology was being used as an instructional tool and as an integral part of what was happening within a classroom. And so we really begin to look at, okay, well, let's look at the different grades. We did some stuff at the elementaries through hybrid learning and the introduction of technology and digital content at that level. We've continued to make sure that we provide access to technology for our students through various classrooms. But what we did was kind of unique at the high school level is we really wanted to make sure that teachers understood how to use that technology as a component of their instruction, as an integral component of their instruction. And so we really begin to look at, okay, how can we do that? How can we make sure that our teachers are trained to use the technology that we have? So we started out a cohort program in which we started off, I can't remember exactly, it was 11 or 12 teachers that we began to do some extensive professional development with, and making sure that they understood how to utilize technology as part of their instructional practice. And we did that for a year. Each of those teachers in that cohort received a laptop cart in their classroom, and they used that for their classes as far as their instructional practice. And it became an integral part of their instruction. It was so popular indeed that the next year we had very little trouble getting additional teachers to form a second cohort. Over the years, I believe we're in our 4th cohort currently, and we have teachers that are waiting lists to be able to come in and receive this professional development so that they can utilize. That's a great model because we want to make sure that the technology that teachers have is actually being utilized in the classroom. There is one problem with this model, though. Eventually, if we continue adding cohorts every year, you get to a point to where you have as many devices in play as we do students using those devices. And we're quickly approaching that point to where we're going to have, if we continue the cohort model as we've been doing for the past few years very successfully, we are reaching that point where we're going to have a tipping point, if you will. And so we come to the board tonight with the presentation basically with the idea that we need to make a decision how we're going to move forward. And so we want to talk about the plan that we've developed over the last year of how we can move forward in such a way that we're maximizing instructional strategies using technology, as well as making sure that students have access to those technologies. And so that's really the essence of what we're talking about tonight. We're reaching we're reaching and quickly approaching that tipping point, and so we need to plan for that and how we would move forward. So that's what we're going to talk about, and at this point I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Curriculum Instruction, Ms. Kim Bass, and she's going to walk us through some things, and then we'll have some other folks share as part of this presentation. Mrs. Bass?
Good evening, everyone. I think if you were here last week and you heard Dr. Weidenbaugh's group talk, you realize that our students really are future ready. What we've observed over the past 4 years with the Modernizing Learning project is that our kids are future ready. The skills that they need, the interaction with technology, as Mr. Tier said last week, beyond using it for social media, beyond using it for note-taking and or internet searches, they've really been able to hone in on how the kids can learn to use technology in a very meaningful way. So we've observed our teachers use technology to teach the curriculum really as a seamless part of solid instructional practice. Students are engaged. You heard that from those that presented last week. The teachers in the program say, I feel like I'm learning more about instruction than technology, and we really do like to hear that because it is about how to engage the students and maximize the differentiation so that we can meet individual needs. We've seen students really embrace the technology as easily in the classroom as they do out of it. That's naturally how they like to live and learn. So we're happy to bring that to them and challenge them in such a way that they're also learning alongside of that. We do think that through this model, we have increased their engagement, their learning, their knowledge, and certainly their 21st century skills. As Dr. Gooden alluded to, we're not just thinking about 9 to 12. We have met with our building principals from K through 12, and we want to make sure that all of our students are involved in that individualized learning that we talked about, meeting their individual needs. And so we are here tonight to say this is our plan, and we're looking for board support to be able to move forward for the thoughtful integration of technology in a way that increases student and teacher access to it, and really the necessary training for teachers. In K through 2 classrooms, we're working toward 8 iPads per classroom and some teacher training. We've got excellent teachers who already do station learning, and we just want to be able to provide some additional technology for them in a way that allows them to work their groups in a better fashion than they can right now without that many devices in the classroom. In grades 3 through 6, currently we have some laptop carts, but we're working toward 8 laptops per room and additional teacher training. 7th and 8th grade, at this point, we're looking at laptop carts for the core area. That ensures that every student is involved in that learning and involved with technology and some additional teacher training. And then to continue the project we've started 9 through 12, we're really looking for a full modernized learning training for all of the teachers in 9 through 12 and laptops deployed to each student. Dr. Gooden showed this chart back here, and if we continue with the cohort device, you can see right now in 2018 we have 1,700 devices. Right now they're not servicing, or they're not serving 1,700 students. We'd like to get to the point where the computers are in the hands of the kiddos and that each one of them is experiencing the benefit of the Modernizing Learning project. So our 4-year plan that we've started to share tonight, and I'll do a couple more slides and then I'll ask Mr. Fink to talk about the money. I'm sure that's what we're waiting for too. But the 4-year plan that we've been able to come up with involves teacher training, technology purchases, technology and administrative support, policy implications, and a communication plan. I tried to make this as succinct as possible. I'm not sure I succeeded, but I did want to make sure that you saw everything that we're thinking about as we look across the next 4 years. So the top line is the curriculum instruction plans, and underneath our technology. This upcoming school year, we'd like to begin training K-12 for those teachers who haven't been involved. We really would have to hire like a head coach, a coordinator type of a person to be able to kind of manage this, originally 9 through 12 and then ultimately K-12. The technology next year will be working on continued infrastructure updates, a distribution center in the 9th grade center to be able to deploy those laptops to students after they receive that new equipment. They would need 2 12-month technicians, and you'll see me, I continue to refer to the K-8 refresh here, and that's according to the future plans on a previous slide that we talked about to be able to deploy that level of technology. 1920 school year, we're looking at giving every 9th grade student a laptop. We would be looking at some coaching support and training, and certainly we'd have to hire a coach to be able to support that additional work with that number of teachers involved in the project. While we do that, technology would be receiving that new equipment, distributing devices to the 9th grade center students, setting up a distribution center in 10-12. We would additionally need 2 12-month technicians to set up and support that 12th grade center and to get ready to take on the deployment of laptops to every 10 through 12 student. And of course, they would be continuing with the K-8 refresh. In school year 2021, we would be deploying computers to every student in 9th through 12th grade. Coaching support and training would continue. We would need 1 additional coach to support that level of involvement with teachers and students and technology. Technology, of course, would be working on receiving that new equipment and distributing those devices and continuing with the K-8 refresh. I'm happy to say 2021 does not involve any new staff. At that point, we're continuing with our training and coaching support, and really this is how we do business now. This is all about how Spring-Forward learns. Spring-Forward learning is modernizing learning. Spring-Forward learning is student-focused learning. It's just the way we do things. At that point, technology would be looking at distribution of devices to 9 through 12 students, receiving that equipment, and then of course deploying it. And that refresh deployment continues K-8 according to the technology plan and the budget that Mr. Fink is about to share. So before I turn the PowerPoint over to him, do you have questions for me on this slide or any of the prior ones?
Don't escape. I'm sure more
I was
questions
hoping
will
I
come
could
out.
go now.
Yeah.
And Mr. Fink is up next.
So what we tried to show here, let me move closer to this. What we tried to show here was the impact of the overall budget. So as Dr. Gooden and Ms. Bass pointed out, we're almost there, equipment-wise, right? We've, over the past 4 years and going into the coming year with Cohort 5 coming on board, we're at the point now where we're so close to saturation, you can taste it. Which is why when you look at the bottom section of the grid on the screen, you can see the equipment cost is pretty much negligible. There's hardly anything there because we're just about there. The higher costs or the added costs really come into getting the right folks on board, not only to do the training piece of it, as Ms. Bass pointed out, but also to service it. We have to make sure that we have the right amount of people on board to help service all that equipment in the field. So if you look down at that bottom line, you can see what the general impact on a year-over-year budget is, or the impact to the budget on a year-over-year basis is. What we're talking about here is about $580,000 over 6 years. So that's it seems to be a very low impact. Obviously, the lowest part of that impact is in the out years. Oh, here we go. There's still some work to do here. Of course, we have some policy work to go through. We have to look at some of the policies that we have in place and make sure that they'll also cover a full deployment program, not only to cover devices that are kept within the walls, the boundaries of the school, but also as equipment goes outside of those boundaries. That also includes things like user agreements for and insurance for equipment that's going to be in the hands of the students that may be staying or may be leaving the grounds as well. So there's still some work in there. We'll be working with the policy committee, Mrs. Zazowski, to go through some of those things that are needed, and of course through our council to go through some of the agreements that might be needed as well. And the good thing about it is we also have resources at other districts who have done similar types of deployments too, so we can kind of piggyback on some of the things that they have. Any questions for me, or do you want to wait till the end?
A quick question.
Sure.
How do we get Miss Bass back? No, I'm only kidding.
We can call her in.
Yeah. I remember, I mean, and I think I asked this at the curriculum meeting, but I don't remember what you said. I don't know if it was curriculum or finance, but so we were putting in $250,000 in budget each year for technology and another $250,000 towards more modernized learning initiatives and all that. So the budget that you put forward up there is additional monies to what we're already.
That's correct.
Because those numbers were just basically, they weren't really, how do I say, they weren't allocated to anything. It was just money that was put there for, as we were growing these programs.
Yeah, the board had put forth those monies that you were speaking about into the budgets starting back probably around when Dr. Goodenow was before my time, but those were carried in the budget. Since then, we've changed a little bit of how we account for that within the budget, whereby, especially since we moved to more of a self-financing program as opposed to a leasing program. So what we do in these cases is we like for, and Mr. Catalano would point this out too, we like to be on a 4-year rolling, since technology kind of falls off the planet after 4 years. So, but we like to be on a 4-year program. So what we do, Mr. DeBello, is we use the monies that we have saved in our cap reserve or in other places throughout our funds, and we buy the equipment, and then we amortize that over 4 years. So as we add this stuff, what we're talking about here is we're adding the equipment and we're dividing it over 4 years. So we're taking money from our operating budget and putting into that a savings account. So then when it's time to refresh those items again, we can then hit that account again and then start and keep going, rolling that forward.
So basically that $500,000 that we were budgeting, then that's what you're utilizing that.
That's correct.
As part of that.
That's correct.
Strategy.
That's part of that. That's correct.
And you said a lot of this, I guess, is the coaching and training that we're seeing up here?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so on a previous slide, I thought that I saw there would be 2 full-time for the 9th grade center to get things up and going, and then 2 later full-time people also
I think what they're referring to are the 2s where there were 2 technicians that would be sitting in a deployment/repair center over in the 9th grade building, and then as this building comes online, actually just before this building comes on, so we're ramped up and ready to go, we would have the same type of thing in this building here for deployments, repairs, exchanges, that type of thing.
Okay, I guess that was my question, because there's so many more students, and this is so much bigger than the 9th grade. Do we need 2 and 2, or?
But again, that could be, we'll see how it goes too. We have to understand what the flow is going to be as well, and what the demands would be to decide if that would get mixed up in a different way. And initially, that's the plan we're looking at.
And I'm assuming, I don't know, there's a whole other conversation happening over there. So then also part of the strategy is that the labs that we currently have would start to go away as well.
Yeah, that's correct. What Mr. Catalano and I worked on was the most efficient way to move devices that we currently have for students within our buildings, which would include students in our media centers and in our computer labs, where we could shuffle the deck, if you will. So as new students in the 9th grade come on, getting new devices, which would be 4-year devices they would use over those 4 years, in year 2, we could also deploy existing laptops that we currently use to the 11th and 12th graders, with the idea that as they move on and graduate, those devices would then be recycled, if you will. They would be taken offline, and then the new devices would be purchased at the 9th grade level. So every 9th grade would have a fresh device as they come in the door, which would then, of course, keep your 4-year rolling perfectly.
One of the earlier charts has the modernized learning device per students, about 1,700 now, the 2022 almost 3,500. So that shows a large growth in number of devices, but this chart up here doesn't show much equipment cost. So how would you go for almost double the devices without a lot of equipment costs being added?
Yeah, okay.
So that chart shows if we were to continue with the cohort model, we'd be bringing on over 300 devices every year, which would soon put us past the tipping point where we'd have more devices than students. So this is a reflection, if we would continue with the cohort model, that's not our plan, because that wouldn't be fiscally responsible.
And Mr. Dennert, also with the cohort coming online this coming year, which is already in the Modernized Learning plan, that's an additional 400 to 500 devices, which would also be added to the numbers that you're talking about, not as part of a full deployment initiative, but just as a part of the regular cohort model. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Nugent, I believe, right? Thanks. Sure, let me get you back up to where you are. It's running slow, I keep pointing it over there. There you go, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. So I'm just going to shift gears a little bit to the communication plan that is on the table right now. So in the spring of 2019, if this would be approved, if we move forward with this model, we would work with our families on the Q&A nights for the 9th grade parents, letters to families and information on the website to try to prep the parents coming in from the 8th grade so they're be aware of the situation, where we are, what our plan is. And then in the fall of 2019, we would have assemblies for the 9th grade students to deploy the technology and provide training on the devices. We did visit several schools over the course of the last year or so, kind of really looking to see how other schools handled this deployment process. So we tried to, gain knowledge and mistakes and things that have been done in other districts so that we would be prepared. So we feel pretty confident in this model that we're sharing with you tonight. Specific email addresses for laptops, questions, etc., those issues. We would try to be really, ahead of the game with the parents coming in for the 9th grade deployment year. So this evening, I have the opportunity. Last week, I did want to piggyback on Dr. Weidenball's presentation. I thought last week there was an excellent opportunity to hear from students on how they've been involved in this process so far. And I think it's important also to mention that tonight we have 2 teachers with us. They're behind me. I'm going to introduce them in just a second. But one thing I wanted to point out is the professional development, in my opinion, so far in cohort, the professional development that has proven to be the most valuable component of our Modernized Learning initiative. The training that our teachers have been receiving has been really in an outstanding mode, if you ask me. Our cohorts have participated in numerous professional development sessions. Again, Dr. Gooden alluded to the fact that we have 4 cohorts that are in the program now, with 5 coming in the fall, our 5th one. And they will have meetings with their individual cohorts, because there's some teachers that are more advanced. And then we have meetings with the cohorts as a whole group, so that they're sharing with one another. So I think that's been an excellent opportunity for all of our teachers. The staff participation has included veterans as long with new teachers. Again, it is accurate that we do have teachers lining up asking to be part of this particular program. The nice thing I think and I think it's important for the board to know, for everyone to know, that as administrators, myself included, we are participating in the professional development sessions as well. So we're sitting in and getting the exact same training in a separate session that the teachers are getting, so that when we go into the classroom, we're tuned in exactly to what's happening there. There has been a best practices fair at the end of last year and scheduled again this year. So we took all of our cohorts which is about, what, we're 40-plus teachers now, all of our cohorts. And on an in-service day, we had a best practices fair where our teachers went around and had a selection to go to see the different learning modalities that are taking place in the classroom. And that was very, very popular in-service for our teachers. I think they got a lot of, and that's where we pick up a lot of teachers come out of it saying, hey, this is outstanding, how do I become part of this process? So I think that's been an excellent piece as well. Overall, I have to say, I've been doing this for a long time. Can't believe it, but it's been a long time. I would tell you straight up, this is, I feel, the most powerful professional development opportunity that I've been part of since in my tenure. As far as it's not just about computers by any stretch of the imagination. The focus is to maximize student engagement and increase differentiation in the classroom. And the teachers that have been involved, we just have 2 here this evening, are going to just take a minute to share how that's happening in their classrooms. So I would like to introduce Erin Mcnally and Sue Miscavige. Erin is in cohort 1, so she was one of the original pilots, and Sue, who's in cohort 3. Erin?
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. Good evening to everyone. So I'm Erin Mcnally, and I teach AP Biology and Anatomy and Physiology here at the high school. And like Dr. Nugent said, I was part of the original 4-person cohort. We have definitely grown since then, and I've enjoyed watching as new teachers have come into this program and really have gotten to collaborate with a lot of them. So one of the things you've heard throughout this presentation is the mission statement of Modernizing Learning, and it being about maximizing engagement and increasing differentiation through the use of technology. But the one thing I want to point out to everybody, that the main point of this program is the differentiation and the engagement. It's not the technology. The technology is just a tool that allows us to get where we want to go. So whenever I'm looking at a new lesson, I'm planning exactly the way that I would for any other lesson. I'm looking at my curriculum, I'm looking at my big ideas, I'm looking at my enduring understandings. I'm planning the lesson and looking at how can I maximize engagement, increase differentiation. Then I ask the question, can technology enhance my lesson? And if it can, great, I'm going to use it. If it can't, I'm not going to use it in the classroom. So it's never about using technologies just for the sake of using technology. So we've talked a lot about the professional development training, and I want to make sure that everybody understands what that training actually looks like. So the training has 2 components to it. There's the small group instruction, and we get that usually during in-service days. And so what that looks like is Dr. Pete Grandy and his TLS coaches, they're going to come in and they will give us training on how to use assessment-driven instruction and how to use the best practices of that. They're also going to show us various differentiation techniques, and they're going to show us different technology tools. But what makes the training so special is the fact that when they are actually giving us the training, they're modeling differentiation for us. So what they're going to do is when they're teaching us about how to do a split screen or a smart chart or something like that, we're going to actually be the students doing a split screen or a smart chart. And the great thing about that is it gives me the opportunity to think about what are all of the questions my students are going to have about how this runs. What are the classroom management things that I need to think about going into this lesson? How am I going to adapt this for the science classroom? So it's already giving me thinking about how I'm going to implement this into my classroom. The other great thing about the way they run the program is the fact that they actually differentiate it for us as teachers. So just like our students, you have different teachers who have different levels of mastery when it comes to differentiation strategies and technology tools. So I am very comfortable with technology. It's something I've always been interested in, and I'm always learning about it. So for me, a lot of times they'll create a different level of instruction where those of us who are more comfortable with technology will do one level of the activity, where teachers who need a little bit more direct instruction with it will have a different level of instruction. Again, it gives us a way to see how differentiation is done in real world and in practice. I actually think the better part of our professional development training is the coaching sessions. So about once every 1 to 2 months, the coaches will actually come into our classrooms and we'll have private meetings with them. Sometimes they're going to be before coaching sessions, which basically means that I get to talk to them about a lesson that I'm planning right now or that I have questions about and how I want to change that lesson. It could be an after coaching session, which means that I've already given the lesson to my students, and then I can talk to them about how things went, what type of improvements I want to make, and those types of things. The third type of coaching I can get is a during coaching, where they actually come in and watch me teach the lesson, and then we can have a meeting afterwards about how did it go. So that's really how the training is done. And I have found, just like Dr. Nugent said, it is by far the best professional development that I have ever received in my career. And it's something that I highly encourage all of my colleagues to be a part of, because it has really changed the way that I teach. So some of the things that I would say I've changed as I've gone forward is it's made me more reflective. I'm constantly looking at the lessons that I'm teaching. How can I increase differentiation? How can I maximize engagement? How can I incorporate technology into my lessons? Even ones that I've already incorporated differentiation and technology into the lessons, I'm constantly looking for how can I make changes to those. It also is making me constantly aware of the needs of my students. How can I adapt my lessons to make sure that every single one of my students is getting what they need in my classroom? Let me give you an example from a lesson that I've done recently. So we, in my anatomy classes, are finishing up with the nervous system right now. And so one of the things we learn about in the nervous system is an action potential and how an action potential moves down a neuron. Well, I have students in my anatomy class who are also in my AP biology class, or also have taken AP psychology. They've done the nervous system in those classes already. And so I don't want to just have them sitting there learning the exact same thing that they've already learned. So one of the opportunities I provide for them is I put them into different groups, and once they can show me mastery of that topic, they get to move on to a different activity, and then that allows me to spend time with my students who haven't taken those previous classes, and it gives them the opportunity to have more one-on-one direct instruction time from me, and the other students who have already reached mastery can move on to the next activity. I'm going to turn things over to Mrs. Susan Miscavige, and she's going to talk about her AP psychology classes.
Does this differentiation mean that some students could complete the course in a lot less time than other students? And therefore, if they finish it in 4 months instead of 9 months, are they take the exam, or are they finished?
No, differentiation isn't so much that they are going to be moving through the class any faster. It's particularly to one specific lesson and how I can gear the instruction towards their mastery of that specific topic. And so when I talk about my students being able to move on to another activity, it's giving them an enrichment activity, it's giving them a different way to look at the topic. So for my students in that situation who were in AP biology, I gave them kind of an AP biology geared lesson that would actually help them with that class as well.
So it's almost, I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's almost like what you're, she's ready to jump in there. Don't worry, Stu, we're anxious to hear from you. But it's almost, kind of what you're talking about is very similar to, I don't know if it was by design or not, but it's very similar to what we've been doing at the hybrid model at Spring City and Royersford. I mean, it's, students break into the groups, not getting into all the details of hybrid model, but it's set up that the teacher in the classroom students can, they learn at different levels or different paces or whatever. And so it's like students could, move forward on one topic that they grasp real quick versus other students that take a little bit longer. But that doesn't always mean every topic's the same way. So some students grasp one topic quicker, another group of students will grasp another topic quicker. So it's what you're doing at the high school level is that you're introducing the topics throughout the school year, and then there's some students that already have somewhat of a background in like you said, the nervous system, so that you're providing other learnings for them as well, so that you're keeping the class moving forward, but you don't have students just sitting bored in some instances.
Right, absolutely. And there's different types of differentiation strategies that you can use. So sometimes where I am grouping them in what we call homogeneous grouping, where I have my students who have reached mastery faster are in one group, and my students who are going to need a little bit longer in a different group. But then there's other ways that you can differentiate in which you're doing what we call heterogeneous grouping, where we're mixing them together. So there's lots of different strategies that you can use. It doesn't necessarily just have to be in the grouping strategy. So, and that's part of what we learn in the professional development training is it's kind of taking us away from what we all kind of thought we knew differentiation was, and opening our eyes to all the different ways that we can actually meet the needs of our students in the classroom.
I think the public needs to be clear that we're not spending all this money buying this technology just to be able to do the same things we've done in the past with laptops and tablets. We're buying it because it enriches the classroom experience with the differentiation, allows you to do teaching exercises that were not possible to be done before. I mean, why should we replace chalkboards with whiteboards if we're doing the same thing with that same piece of technology? We want this because we can do things we couldn't do before, and we have to be constantly monitoring that in the classroom, these things are being used for innovation, not for duplication.
Absolutely. And there's a SAMR model that we learn in differentiation, and it talks you through the different levels of differentiation you can do. And what you're referring to is the substitution level. And that's one of the things we talk about, that we want to move out of that substitution level as fast as we possibly can to making sure that we're not just taking a worksheet and putting the worksheet onto the computer, because you're absolutely right. That does not benefit our students at all.
Good evening. I'm Susan Miscavige. I teach both AP Psychology and the Senior Elective Psychology Sociology for seniors. So what I wanted to talk about this evening is both my experience and my students' experience with modernizing learning. I asked them to just give me a one-sentence or a couple-sentence answer on how it's impacted their learning in the classroom, not just in my classroom, but in all the modernizing learning classrooms that they've been in. So I'm going to be talking about maximizing engagement and increasing differentiation, and then in between that also kind of adding in some of the things that my students have told me today. One of the things as a psychology teacher is I always want to create a non-threatening environment for my students, and I'm concerned about them having the opportunity to express themselves in a way that's not going to make them uncomfortable. So one of the neat things about modernizing learning is it allows even the shy students to participate in a way that they don't need to feel like someone's good. They're going to be embarrassed in the classroom. For example, there's two programs that I use. One is called Padlet, and the second is Nearpod. Padlet is basically almost like a virtual corkboard that they can pin their answers on. I give them each a number that I know what the number is, but the students don't know what the number is, so I know who's posting each item, but they don't know. And so it's neat because they can make a comment on a topic, and then they can comment on each other's topics, but they're having a dialogue with one another without having to worry about who's saying what. The other program, Nearpod, is an interactive presentation, almost like a PowerPoint program, where you can incorporate quizzes, you can incorporate polls, there's points where they can draw things. And again, I have the opportunity as a teacher to hide the student names. So if I want them to just give a short answer of how they feel something impacted, especially with sociology, how did something impact the world? And they can make their statement, and then I can share out answers, and then we can discuss them. And one of the students today said, I'm not the most outspoken person, so the Modernizing Learning program allows me to give feedback electronically when I probably wouldn't in class. So you have that student who might be embarrassed or might be not the kid who's going to raise their hand or is going to die if the teacher calls on them and doesn't want to answer. This allows them to have that opportunity to answer and, maybe express themselves when they wouldn't. It also increases accountability of all the students because as teachers, sometimes we try to be mind readers and we'll ask them, do you understand what's going on? Do you have any questions? And then it's crickets. So it's nice to see that they all will have to give an answer because some of these programs will tell us how many students have participated in the poll. So I wait till I see 100%. And so while we're waiting for that, they know that they're accountable. And one of the kids today, this one made me laugh a little bit, said, it made me pay attention more because I have to complete it and it makes learning easier. So he is another student who's very quiet, but has the opportunity to do that through the Modernizing Learning programs we use. We do wait till everyone responds. So as we were talking about, we have some anchor activities that Dr. Grandy has talked to us about, and it's not busy work. It's something that the students can do to enhance what they're learning in the AP classroom. It's usually just preparing for the AP exam in May and just using practice questions or doing something else. But in our psych-social classes, it's enriching activities or maybe maybe getting a little bit more detailed activities that will help them to continue on while everybody gets the opportunity to make their thoughts be known. And one of the students said, the Modernizing Learning program has allowed me to receive extra resources while at school. It allows you to work at your own speed and the best way for you. And what is also neat is that it increases the collaboration among students who might not necessarily talk to each other outside of the classroom, but they have the opportunity to do so in these different formats. When it comes to increasing differentiation, it allows me to give the students immediate feedback. It allows me to get immediate feedback. And again, we go back to that mind reader piece where I'm trying to see if they get the concept and they understand what we're talking about. And sometimes they look like they do, but they don't. So in this case, I can give a poll or I can ask a question, and then I can see how many kids had the right answer. And then at that point, I can say, all right, we need to stop and go back, and I need to go back over something, or we can do the differentiation piece where I'll ask some kids to come with me, and then other kids can go on the other side of the room and work on their anchor activity or work on the next part of the assignment while I'm getting those kids who didn't get it together. It allows more opportunity to meet the needs of our students. For example, classical conditioning is one of the most difficult concepts in psychology to understand. So this year I did a lesson where we differentiated, and I gave them the day before, our psychology, sociology students were given a set of questions and a set of scenarios to answer for classical conditioning, as well as just a question, how comfortable do you feel with this topic? So I took that information home, I graded their scores, and then I analyzed the data overnight and was able to group them so the next day when they came in, they were given the opportunity to be set in groups that were homogeneous groups. Those kids who got it got to have time on their own. Kids who didn't get it were able to work with me one-on-one with. So we were all doing the same worksheet, but we were able to get into these different groups and maximize that differentiation. I'm going to piggyback with what everybody else has said. This has made me a better teacher. This is my 20th year teaching, and this has made me a better teacher by far. It gives me more encouragement to try new things. I've been through a lot of different initiatives in my 20 years and a lot of different lesson plan strategies, and this by far has been one of the best experiences in my 20-year teaching career. It allows me to be more responsive to my students' needs and to be able to be, as Ms. McNally said, more reflective on my teaching. And while the differentiation lessons take a very long time to put together, it is absolutely 100% time well spent. And finally, it gives me the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues that I don't typically see. I see most of my social studies department members at our department meetings, but I'm able to work with math teachers, science teachers, teachers in the 9th grade center that we don't see at all, and even something as simple as procedures of how to get the computers in and out of the laptop cart at the beginning of the year. We're able to collaborate with one another and come up with some really good ideas on how to do that, and it's something that I wouldn't have the opportunity without being in the program. So I thank you very much.